All right, we are recording. Um, so before we sort of dive into some of the questions you had about sort of, some good economic development tools or tools or data points to measure economic development and competitiveness, um, I'll just sort of go over some quick features about the new layout that we just added. Um, so all the analytics and tools that are available underneath your license here will be under this My Tools section. Now, My Tools page might look slightly different than your page just because of a couple of, add-on analytics that you have to pay extra for. But like I said, your My Tools page will contain all the analytics that are available underneath your license. And we have them grouped underneath these 7 or 8 different headers that are sort of briefly go over. Um, but yeah, just to sort of give the overall lay of the land here. So, big picture tools underneath here are great for um, tools underneath here are great for sort of letting you examine overall trends in your region. Definitely go over some of these a little bit later. Demographics, if you want information on topics like age, race, gender, etc., this is where you'll find that. Education, here you'll find information around post-secondary degrees conferred by post-secondary institutions. So you're sort of building a talent pipeline to specific occupations. You'll also find information on whether it's feasible or not to retrain one occupation to become another occupation, as well as some skill gaps and award gaps. Um, Industry, analytics underneath this how they present data by industry or NAICS code. So if you're looking for any type of industry information, this is a good place to check for that. Occupation, analytics underneath here present data by occupation or SOC or SOC code. So if you're looking for any type of occupation information, that's a good place to check for that. More is kind of like a miscellaneous category of analytics you couldn't fit elsewhere. And then reports. These analytics here basically grab data from the rest of these analytics and create a ready-made PDF or Word document that gives you a good general overview or subject on a specific or general overview or summary on a specific subject area. And these are really useful for sort of getting that requisite baseline knowledge on a topic. And once you have that, you can dive deeper and look for trends in the rest of these analytics. You can also upload your organization's logo to JobsEQ and automatically add it to the cover page of these reports. So that's a nice feature and can upload your organization's logo in this custom page. And then widgets, I'm not going to go over this too much, but this is a free add-on that we have for clients where you can add a little widget or ticker box to your organization's website that will automatically update with JobsEQ data. And like I said, that's free. If you want to learn more about that, you can just reach out to your CRM. A couple other quick navigational things. Um, in the upper right top menu here, we have this bullhorn icon. This tells you sort of what's new in JobsEQ. Usually for our large updates, we'll send out a big email, telling you what sort of been updated. But we don't necessarily expect you to log into JobsEQ every day, and you can, it's easy to lose track of this stuff. So if it's been a while since you logged into JobsEQ, data looks a little bit different. You can open this up and see what's been updated since you last logged in. Like I said, usually for our big quarterly updates, we'll send out an email. If you want to see our planned update schedule, you can click this data release schedule tab, and you can see sort of what our planned update. So, like I said, I think tomorrow we're going to be releasing 2025 Q3 data here. The other thing I'm going to point out is we have this little question mark tab here. If you open up that, uh, sometimes you'll find tutorial videos here. You'll also find help documentation. Each analytic within JobsEQ has its own help page. And those help pages, for example, I'll just like do one real quick. Tell you, where the data is sourced from, the technical notes box, and then column definitions and stuff like that. Um, in addition to these help resources, we do have a live chat available. Type your question into here. If it's between the hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern, one of our live JobsEQ economists will immediately log on and answer your question. Even if it's outside of those business hours, still type your question in here. to go to your email inboxes, and we'll get back to the next business day. Can't encourage you enough to take advantage of that live chat feature. Um, we're here to help you in whatever way possible, and we want you to use our data. All right. So, you said specifically early in our conversation that you were sort of interested in sort of finding regional stats for South Florida, right? Um, so, the first thing I would do is I would, create a custom region representing South Florida. I see you nodding your head, so you've done that already.
Yes.
No
Yep.
need to go over that then.
I don't think so. Yeah, no, nope.
Well, actually, well, sorry. Just so I can use it as an example,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just do this real quickly. We'll and then, apologies, I'm bad with geography. Why is this
No,
working?
no worries.
So I'm just gonna start with something. Why is this working? All right, we'll just go all the way down here. I was trying to do a shortcut. Uh, so it's just like, where's the cutoff line for you?
Yeah,
And
so it's sort of that West Palm Beach down to Miami. So it is the Miami MSA, which is what we've mostly been
okay,
working on.
let's see if this works for me here. Hmm. Must be sort of quarterly update related.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add here?
No, that's yeah, that's fine. Because we've also made some custom regions that sort of Miami with all the other MSAs that we're interested in, but I think
Hmm.
for the purposes of examples, this is good.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, if we're just using Miami MSA, then we don't need to make a custom region here, but that's how you would do it. Be very careful about the region resolution that you want to use, because that does affect the analysis. And uh, I know we're doing a bit of a speed run here, but for people watching later, there's a tutorial video about how to create a custom region. All right, so once you have your region here, um, you mentioned that you're a big fan of using Data Explorer here. Generally speaking, that does kind of have a lot of the raw data sets that power a lot of the analytics here. So this does give you a pretty good holistic view here from finding industry, employment data, occupation, education, etc. Um, you know, in addition to finding industry employment here, um, the industry employment data is by place of work. I guess it sort of depends on who your audience is, but you know, another way of sort of measuring economic development in town is having a better understanding of your workforce, right? Because your labor force is kind of an asset. So, in the occupation data set here, you can look at stuff by place of work, but also by place of residence. So, what can be interesting here is, um, and I'll do a couple different occupations here. All right. So here we got employment by place of work plus in place of residence. And if you subtract one from the other, we have this stat called net commuting, right? So here I can see my employment for place of residence is higher than my place of work for registered nurses. This means, we're sort of a net exporter of registered nurses in the Miami MSA here. Same thing for software developers. So, one thing that could be of interest is although we like to think of ourselves or regions as sort of being like independent of one another. Here, we're clearly exporting workers into the surrounding region. So, it could be interesting to figure out where these workers are going, um, because what's happening in a neighboring county, since we're a net exporter of workers, does affect our residents, right? So, um, that's these sort of net commuting stuff can be sort of interesting for that point. If you wanted to dive deeper into finding like out where these residents are going, um, in our maps analytic, we do have more detailed commuting data. Um, and apologies if I'm going over things you're already familiar with. Um, I guess is it worthwhile showing that or
Yeah, I've not done. Really all I've done is just like sort of GDP and some like employment numbers in Data Explorer, but
Hmm.
yeah, I have not looked at the commuting.
Okay. Um, so in our maps analytic here, click the plus sign next to data here. We have this commuting to/from data set. So this is our more detailed commuting patterns. Um, so, we just determined we're a net exporter and we're curious about where residents are going. Which is to commuting from. You can do it by, specific occupation. Um, I'll just leave it as total for now, but maybe we'll go back and do that. So, if you have people commuting across state lines, you're going to want to put in USA. Um, generally speaking, we'll just put it as Florida here since we're pretty far down there. Um, and then I'm going to leave the map detail level as county. All right, so then we can add some labels here. Look at that. All right, so the counties that are highlighted in yellow are the counties that sort of where we're looking at residents from. They're a target or where residents are commuting from. And so this number here, 7,485 in Martin County, this is saying that 7,045 residents of our, Miami, MSA, these three counties here are working in Martin County. Uh, you know, 7,321 residents of our Miami metro area is working in Lee County. Um, that's went on here. And then, here, 693,449 residents in Palm Beach are working in, one of these three counties here. That's what's going on there. Um, so you can do that. If you want to uh, view this data instead of as a map, instead of viewing it as a map, you want to view it as an Excel spreadsheet. You can export this as a spreadsheet here and view the data that way. One thing to be aware of is sometimes you'll have sort of these like stretch commuting patterns, like, oh, is somebody really, commuting all the way over here, or not every day. Generally not. So like that's kind of a little sort of modeling feature of it's a the way that the reason why that occurs is because of the way the survey question is phrased on the data source that we use. So we're using a combination of American Community Survey data and loads data to create um, the commuting patterns. And the way the American Community Survey question is phrased is it asks you, where did you work last week? And because of that, you could have these weird stretch commuting patterns like, oh, I was on a work conference or something like that, and then I got the ACS survey, and now I'm showing up as commuting across the entire state. Um, so that's just something to be aware of. Generally, these larger numbers here are more indicative of people's regular commutes. Well, some of this stuff here might be some of those weird one-off occurrences. Um, but like I said, this can be useful in sort of identifying these regional connections and regional partnerships. You know, what happens in like Hillsborough or Martin or Lee or whatever or Collier has an impact on residents in the Miami MSA. If you click the little gear icon, we can edit the map that we're looking at. You can change the color ramp and all this other stuff. But if we click the little query tab, let's say, all right, it's cool looking at it for all occupations. Maybe I want to hone in on something. We were a net exporter of software developers, right? So let's say if I was curious about where those folks are going. So I could do that, software developers. And now I rerun the map. And, generally speaking, there's most of them are staying in the MSA. There's not, you know, fairly obvious. I guess there's a couple here. Um, but that's another way of sort of just looking at these commuting patterns and identifying regional partners and things like that. You can add layers to this map by clicking the plus sign here. We have some pre-made reference layers here for you. So, if you want to add airports, uh, you can do that. If you want to upload your own layer, you can do that as well. Um, you can upload a spreadsheet with an address or coordinates, or if you have a shape file, you can upload that shape file as well. Um, but we have some, like I said, the pre-made layers here, like opportunity zones and things like that. Um, so that's there. And if you want to change the base map, you can do that as well. If you want to change it to a satellite image or something. Uh, any questions about that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Um, that's one thing you could do. Another thing, um, that could be interesting is, um, in terms of examining your sort of workforce is, um, making sure your region has, the talent needs, to support businesses. Um, quick story. Um, I used to work for the Cuyahoga County Department of Development in Cleveland, Ohio, and um, one of the things we were thinking about going into or examining was like self-driving cars. Um, the director had read an article saying that uh, Pittsburgh was a leader in self-driving cars, so was Detroit. Um, there are sort of Rust Belt brother and sisters in Cleveland, Ohio. So it's like, why aren't we diving into this? Well, to um, to get into self-driving cars, one, you need to have a strong automotive sector. Detroit, that's what they do, right? They build cars, Motor City. Cleveland, not as much. Um, and I looked at that by examining the location quotient. You're already sort of familiar with that stuff, so I won't show that. But another thing that you need is a strong robotics program, for the self-driving part of it. And uh, Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh is one of the best robotics programs in the United States. Um, Cleveland has a really great university called Case Western, strong software engineering program, all that stuff. But it's kind of a small school, so it doesn't graduate a lot of folks in that stuff. So, um, you know, it was, we could get into self-driving cars in Cleveland, but it wasn't playing to our natural strengths. Um, And the next thing that I sort of want to examine is that sort of educational aspect, right? What are the universities in our area? What degrees are they producing? That's kind of our, self-replenishing labor force. Of course, you can have people, um, migrate into the area to fill positions, but kind of harder to do. If you have somebody that, moved here for school, odds are they kind of want to stay in the place. Um, you know, it's nice and sunny. You're not dealing with 15-degree weather like I am in Cleveland, Ohio. So, um, you can look at the awards analytic. That's sort of just like the quick, nice and easy view of stuff. Um, what we've done here is grab data from the National Center of Education Statistics and every school that's eligible for Title IV funding, which is a broad range of schools from your traditional four-year universities to community colleges to even beauty schools. They have to report what types of degrees they conferred in the academic year and in what programs they conferred those degrees in, programs or majors. So what we've done um, is connect those programs or zip codes, connected them to SOC codes, creating a SIP-SOC crosswalk saying, hey, if you get a degree in this program, you're most likely to go into these types of occupations, or at least theoretically, you have the skill set to go into these occupations. Granted, very few of us are working in occupations strictly related to our bachelor's degree, but if you got a degree in accounting, you theoretically have the skills to become an accountant, right? Um, so here, if you click the little arrow, you can see what occupations we've connected to that zip code there. So what you can do in this programs by occupation query type is type in a SOC code that you're interested in sort of learning more about the talent pipeline for. Let's say like budget analyst, for example. So here in the 2023 to 2024 academic year, I can see there's 1,310 degrees conferred in programs related to budget analysts. Now, we're not saying all, 1,310 of these folks are going to go on to become budget analysts. If you click this arrow here, this 931 degrees in finance have to be split between these like 10 or 12 different occupations here. We're just saying, if they so chose, they have the skill set to theoretically become budget analysts. If you click show more details here, you get more information around the type of degree conferred. So whether it was a certificate or bachelor, master's, etc. So that's the programs by occupation query type. That makes sense? Great. So yeah, useful tool for sort of defining that potential talent pipeline. Um, Programs by school. Here you can look at the degree production in a specific school. Um, what's a good one? University of Miami. Go Canes. Um, uh, I've enjoyed, even though my parents went to IU, I've enjoyed Michael Irving's
Yeah.
antics over the last couple of weeks. It's
Yeah.
been, been
Yeah.
fun. Um, so here I can see um all the different sort of programs that were conferred in the 2023-2024 academic year here. So you can learn a little bit more about the different degree production at the school here. Um, that's programs by school query type. If you switch this to school by programs, here you can type in a zip code or program and see what schools were conferring degrees in that program. So you could type in, computer science here. And I'll take show more details off. But you can see, the schools that were conferring degrees here. You do have to be a little bit careful with the computer stuff, just because, there's computer programming, which is going to pull up a different list of schools. Uh, Computer engineering is going to pull up a different list of schools. So, um, something to be aware of there. Also, um, you know, sometimes you'll have a large state school with large state school with multiple branch campuses and satellite campuses. And sometimes school will be a little bit lazy about how they report the data. Instead of breaking out for each individual branch campus, they'll just host it all under their flagship main campus. So when they do that, when you come in here and like, hey, I know there's like a FSU branch campus in my area, how come it's not showing up? It's because the school decided not to break out the data, that level of detail. So that's just something to be aware of. If you click show more details here, you can see the address of the school and total enrollment and average net price and stuff like that. Any questions about that?
No, don't think so, no.
All right. Um, so, here in awards, you can only really view that one, the most recent academic year. If you go to Data Explorer, um, go to education, here you have sort of more flexibility for querying that data. You can query across multiple years. You can also, get information about, the gender of the graduates and stuff like that. So that's possible here too if you're doing that type of stuff. Um, we're here. Another thing that might be of interest, besides the industry data set and the GDP data set, is the Laos data set. Um, so, in the industry data set, you can look at how industry employment has changed over time. Um, the cool thing about the Laos data set is this updates on a monthly basis. So a lot of the things in JobsEQ update on a quarterly basis. This updates on a monthly one. So here you can get a little bit more timely labor market information for your region. So, I could create a time series here. And, maybe I don't want to go all the way back that far, but here we'll go to 2020. And here, I can see sort of the effect of COVID on my regional economy on a monthly basis. So March to April, peak COVID years, unemployment spikes to 13%. Uh, you know, all these sort of bad stats, labor force numbers down, blah, blah, blah. If you scroll down, you can see over time, those numbers come down. And about October 2021, we get back to where we were sort of pre-COVID here. So then, you continue down and numbers better than ever. So, you can do that type of stuff here. Oh, we do have a little bit of a spike here. Um, so, that's sort of possible, just sort of seeing that information on a monthly basis and giving you a little bit more timely labor market information. Any questions about that?
No.
Um, Another thing that might be of interest is, population projections. Um, so, um, a lot of this data is not available before 2020 just because the census, like some geographic boundary stuff changed. And so I think they like used a different model. So they're just kind of like reconciling stuff. I think they were supposed to, I think at some point, make it so they could go back and you could compare the historical data to this sort of new population projection model, the Census Bureau. But things got weird towards the end of the year with the government shutdown and stuff like that. So I think we're still waiting on that. So right now we're sort of the most recent, the latest, the farthest you can go back is 2020. But you know, um, population increase or sort of population projections are sort of an important point just because um, I'm sure you're aware of sort of the industry, the forecasts we do, the baseline forecasts and stuff like that. And, there are a lot of things that can affect projected industry employment or occupation employment, things like automation, outsourcing, or whatever. But one of those components is population change. So, um, you know, in Northeast Ohio, for example, a lot of our baseline forecasts or industry projections are negative. And, one of the reasons why, it could be a lot of reasons why that is occurring. But one of the reasons why that is occurring is because like the population here has been decreasing for the last like 20 years. So, it's not necessarily, oh, the industry is doing poor, like, oh, it's projected to crater. It's just, the region overall, the population's decreasing. Um, I don't think Florida's the opposite problem where I think everybody's moving there. Um, so from Ohio. Uh, so most famous resident to move from Ohio to South Florida, LeBron James. But that's another story.
Hmm. It's a big one.
Actually, quick aside, one of my favorite economic stories. So I'm originally from Chicago, but one of my favorite stories is when LeBron first moved to Miami. Um, that was around the Great Recession time. So when he left Cleveland, all the economic indicators were kind of on the downturn, and so people were like, LeBron left and the economy went sideways. And then when he came back to Cleveland, um, the sort of recovery had occurred, and like when he came back, all the economic indicators had sort of turned upward.
It
So
was just LeBron. Yeah.
LeBron effect, um, King James. Um, so yeah. Anyway, uh, you know, population loss or increase, sort of an important thing to keep track of here, and so you can see those projections. And you can see it by these sort of different demographic categories as well. Um, and I guess too, you can look at it by these cohorts and see like, hey, I want to see the number of like school age children, how that's changing over time. Maybe that affects schools and stuff like that. Recently where I live, there was a big debate about shutting down an elementary school just because attendance overall, we have like five of them. Uh, the class sizes have been shrinking, and you know the population was tending to sort of more single folks, and yeah, just overall the amount of young kids living in the town were decreasing. So just talk about, hey, maybe we should repurpose this building to like a special education center instead of just like a whole overall elementary school. So um, it can be sort of interesting discussions there. Um, we do have migration stats here, although it's not maybe as beneficial as you would like to see necessarily. Like, it doesn't tell you where people are migrating to or from. For that, I would actually recommend using the IRS tax stats. Are you familiar with that? Okay, yeah. So IRS technical information stuff, very useful. Um, even tells you, the tax return filing of that person, right? So you can see, like, oh, are we attracting wealthy people, based on what they filed last year? Are we losing wealthy people? Um, so you have some birth rate and death rate stuff here, so that can be kind of interesting. Um, so that kind of wraps it up for Data Explorer data sets. Um, before we leave too, you can sort of save queries, right? And you're familiar with, you can create these sort of charts and things like that. So, that's there. Um, let's, let's, um, no. The next thing I think would be worthwhile going over is, okay. Um, yeah, let's, well, sorry, I'm talking to myself. Um, let's let's continue sort of talking about sort of more sort of economic development things. So, um, sort of a quick complement to Data Explorer. You can do time series or trend analysis here. If you want to make a chart and you just want to save some time, the labor and wage trends is another analytic where you can do time series analysis very quickly. Um, you have these five different data sets here, and um, you can just see how these things change over time pretty quickly. Um, Another thing that's in here that's kind of cool is we have average annual wages and cost of living data. So here you can see how average annual wages have changed over time. Uh, but here we don't have time series cost of living data, but point in time, see that you can enter, uh, you know, any county or and stuff in here if you want, uh, and sort of see that stuff here. Um, you know, a thing that could be useful is, well, cost of living is kind of high here, but um, you can look at your purchasing power in Miami versus like Chicago and stuff like that. So, um, area we'll throw New York in here. That's probably higher, but yeah, this can be sort of useful for business attraction efforts and things like that. Yeah. Um, and then we have establishment counts. So this is in the industry data set in Data Explorer, but once again, just a quicker way to view these trends. And these are basically establishment counts are similar to business counts. So you can see how the number of firms have changed over time in a specific industry. Um, so this can be sort of useful for sort of a strategic analysis or something like that. Here, for example, we can see um, and this is actually kind of interesting. The number of manufacturing firms have really taken off over the last like 5 years. So, um, even higher, pretty great recession thing. Um, so that's the labor and wage trends. Another thing that might be of interest is the shift share analytic. So this tells you sort of what was driving um, industry growth in an area. Um, so here over the last 10 years, we've gained 11,172 jobs in manufacturing. And this is breaking up the drivers of industry growth. So here, if the manufacturing economy in um in Florida, sorry, in Miami grew at the same rate as the overall national economy, we would have expected an increase of 5,242 jobs. However, they grew by 11,172 jobs. So some other things might have been going on. If the manufacturing sector in Miami grew at the same rate as the manufacturing sector of the overall U.S. economy, we would have actually expected a decrease of 1,967 jobs, but we had an increase of 11,172. So obviously, there's sort of this local competitiveness factors. There's things going on locally that allow us to grow even more than the overall economy and overall manufacturing sector. Um, and, that could be just, our firm or firm owners just know how to do it better than folks. Um, you know, a lot of things can go into local competitiveness area, but now favorable tax environment, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, scroll down in the table, you can see the NICS codes within the manufacturing sector, sort of where this growth is occurring, and then you can, continue to break this down further by clicking detail here. It will replace the industry that's in that box. And then you can, continue doing this analysis. So, this is sort of interesting, sort of what's driving employment growth in the area. Any questions about that?
Nope.
All right. Uh, another thing that may be of interest is the supply chain analytic. So this is sort of using modeled like GDP data and stuff like this, but this gives you an idea about sort of the supply chain in area. And so, um, the basic idea behind this is sort of identifying where there's sort of leakages in your regional economy. The idea behind it is, your regional economy is kind of like a bathtub, right? And you want to keep that water or money in your regional economy circulating in that regional economy. Anytime a business in your region has to spend money outside of your region to create their product, that's sort of a leakage. In the most selfish sense, you can say, your region, your employers in your region are subsidizing residents of another area when they have to spend money outside of your region. Um, Also, too, the firm starts looking at their supply chain costs and like, hey, we're spending X amount of dollars every month to, outside of our region to transport this thing into here to make our product. Maybe we should think about relocating closer. So, it could be of interest as well. So here, um, you put in your the buyer industry when you're using the suppliers query type. So here, food manufacturing. This is where they're buying stuff from. The way the color ramp works is I believe it's a number greater than, I guess it's 80 here. It's green, a little bit less than 80. It's sort of yellowish orange, red there. And then you can see, purchases from U.S. firms, purchases from firms within our region, the Miami metro area, purchases outside the Miami MSA, um, total supplier employment in our region. So, telling us how big sort of this industry is within our region here. Um, so that's what's going on in suppliers query type. And, once again, we're not actually like, calling up X business and finding out what their supply chain is. It's based off of sort of model GDP data. Um, if you switch this to buyers, you can see this now becomes the supplier industry. So you can see, what industries are buying for the food manufacturing sector. So, this is sort of building the case that like, oh, this is an important industry within our region. These are, services are being bought from other from other industries within our region here. Um, if you switch this to gaps, you can see, potential supply chain gaps. So this could be supply chain targets. We're basically kind of identifying where sort of leakages are occurring and saying like, hey, um, if all the industries in your region bought services from this industry within your region, that would increase the opportunity, that would increase the employment, or, an additional 9,983 jobs in this sector could be supported if everybody bought from within the region for that industry. Um, so you can sort of see that. And then a quick view underneath buyer industries, you can see which industries would be purchasing services from that sector. It basically just takes you back to that buyer's query type here. Um, any questions about that?
Nope.
Right. Um, another thing that could be of interest is the industry occupation mix analytic. So, in Data Explorer, you can look at um, employment by industry and occupation. Here in industry occupation mix, we combine those two data sets together. So for a specific industry, you can see what occupations are employed in that industry. To open that up, and yeah, well, let's skip with landscaping services. Why not? So here, all the occupation employment information that you see in this table is specific to folks working in this landscaping services industry. We have more than 50 bookkeepers working in the Miami MSA, but 50 of them work in this landscaping services sector here. Her average annual wage inside this industry is $49,000. And here's their employment forecast within that industry. That makes sense? Um, that's the occupation distribution type. If you want to switch this to industry, you can plug in a specific occupation here. So we do bookkeepers again. And here I can see all the different industries that bookkeepers work in. So not a big surprise. A lot of them work in the accounting tax prep industry. But you have some in residential building construction, blah, blah, blah. You can see how their average annual wage varies by which industry that they're working in, right? So same occupation, but different industries have different wage premiums. So that can be kind of interest. Any questions about that?
Nope.
Two, I'll also point out, if you stumble across an occupation that you're unfamiliar with, what you can do is if you click this hyperlink here, there's this feature called occupation profile. Um, and before I actually go in this, seems like you're sort of familiar with SOC codes and all that sort of stuff and how they're defined. All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Um, something I like to tell folks, a lot of times when you're working with an employer or something like that, they'll give you the job title that they're looking to hire. However, to use JobsEQ effectively, you need to match that job title to a specific SOC code, just because SOC codes are the unit of measurement for occupation information within JobsEQ. So if you open up occupation profile here, here you have a description of SOC code, just basically taken from ONET directly. Training tab shows you the typical education and training requirements needed to enter that occupation. This shows you the current educational attainment profile of people working in that occupation in your region. Shows you any post-secondary schools They're conferring degrees related to that occupation. The wages tab shows you the distribution of wages for that occupation in different industries. You have these ONET skills and attributes. And then you can call rapid codes. They don't tell you where an apprenticeship is located, but just shows you there can be a defined apprenticeship path associated with that occupation. I haven't seen rapids codes really used too much in the wild, but if you want to learn more about it, there's like a website called apprenticeship.gov here. So yeah, this is useful if you stumble across an occupation you're unfamiliar with, or you just want a quick profile about that occupation in your region. You can export that there. Um, before I, yeah, actually, let's get into, um, oh, I could have structured this a little bit better, but, yeah, we'll do that now. So, earlier I was talking about education data, right? Um, and sort of, making sure you had a trained labor force. Um, we do have this feature called award gaps. Um, and so what happens here, I like sort of looking at this in sort of table format, but we basically treat your region as if it was an island, and um, the only workers that you're going to have to replenish your workforce is coming within that area. Um, and so that's sort of how we calculate these award gaps, whether it can meet the annual demand of new workers for that occupation, or if it's in line with sort of what the amount of degrees that are expected to be produced for a region of that size. As a sort of U.S. awards benchmark here. So that's how these sort of occupation or award gaps are being calculated here. Um, so, that can be kind of, if you do have a gap, you know, the one way to close that, right, is you're going to have to import new workers, or maybe expand education training programs or something like that. So um, that can be of interest there. You can also sort of look at stuff by program. Didn't this one. Nope, no gap. So this query only displays gaps. So uh, one of the reasons why I'm having trouble here is because there's no gaps in these programs. We'll just do registered nursing. Let's try that one. So this gives you an idea sort of where, you know, the gaps are occurring by program. Any questions about that?
Nope.
All right. Um, let's go into some of the demographic data here. Um, so there's three different types of demographic analytics. Demographic profile shows you demographic information for the entire population of a region, while industry diversity and occupation diversity shows you demographic information for those folks by folks who are working. So if I want to know how many women lived in the Miami metro area, I'd use demographic profile for that. If I want to know how many women worked in manufacturing in the Miami MSA, I would use industry diversity for that. If I want to know how many women engineers lived in the Miami MSA, I'll use occupation diversity for that. Um, all right, so demographic profile, most of the information in this analytic comes from the 5-year American Community Survey estimates. I think in the next day or two, or maybe it's just happened, they'll be releasing the 2024 5-year ACS estimates. Um, there's a bit of delay because of the government shutdown, but right now we still have the 2023 5-year ACS estimates in here. When the 2024 estimates are released, it usually takes about a month or so for us to get them within JobsEQ. Not necessarily as simple as just like uploading it in here. We have a lot of other models that are, that need to be rerun because of the new data. But here, you can look at comparisons between different MSAs if you want. So you can see your population, your gender splits here. You can see, the median age in our Miami MSA skews a little bit higher than Chicago, New York. Um, I can see we sort of over-index in that sort of 75 plus range. Makes sense, nice and sunny. Um, then we have race and ethnicity splits here. Um, economic characteristics. So you have labor force participation rate, prime age labor force participation rate. So those folks that are in their prime working years, 25 to 54 here. Percent of folks working from home, armed force, labor force. So this is active military in the region. Um, you have educational attainment here, so for folks 25 to 64. Housing stats. Um, this is using that ACS data, right? So it's a little bit more data. You probably have better, more recent property value information elsewhere, but if you don't, that's available here. And then social characteristics. So poverty rate, number of households receiving SNAP, um, all that sort of stuff here. Um, any questions about that? If you want to view historical data, you can switch the mode to historical here and view data going back to 2011. Um, that's the summary table. Switch this to unemployed. You can see demographic information for those folks who are unemployed here. And coming from those 5-year ACS estimates. You can see the distribution of household income. And then region stats. Add these here again. So this is our general commuting information, just telling you sort of number of people coming in and out. Like we went over earlier in a maps analytic, you have that sort of more detailed commuting information, so you can see specifically where people from are coming from and going to. You have K through 12 characteristics, so pupil to teacher ratio, spending per pupil, electricity rates data here, and then union and membership data here as well. And yeah, that's demographic profile. Any questions about that?
Nope.
Great. Um, Move to industry diversity next. Yeah. Well, let's just go to occupation diversity. Um, I like to view this in the table format, but here, like I said, you can sort of see demographic information um, by occupation. So here, if I want to look at like gender stats for people in food prep and serving related occupation, I can do that. Um, so you can see like, oh, okay. Um, People working in the food prep and serving related occupations tend to be more tends to skew a little bit more female compared to our overall workforce here in Miami. Can be sort of an interesting analysis. Um, Another thing that you could do is, you can create your own custom occupation groups and industry groups, right? Um, we also have some pre-made groups for you. To access what those pre-made groups are, click this little spyglass icon. And go underneath occupation clusters. And this shows you some of the pre-med groups for you here. So, you know, one of the things that we did, we have like, blue collar employment and stuff like that. But one of the more interesting groups we have is we group together occupations where the entry level education requirement is the same. So I put in high school degree occupations here. And then now these are occupations where you typically only need a high school degree to enter them. And I can do the same analysis um, and see, okay, my high school degree occupations tend to skew slightly more male than my overall workforce here. So that can be of interest. Any questions about that? Some other categories here besides age, educational attainment, race, and ethnicity um, is education and training requirements. So here, similar to what we were looking at in that occupational profile um, thing that report we were looking at earlier, here you can see the educational and training requirements for an occupation. So you can search that easily here. Um, and then um, we have underemployment data here. So this is using the Fed's definition of unemployment, which is or underemployment, um, which is basically folks that are working in an occupation. It's folks with a bachelor degree working in occupations that typically don't require a bachelor degree. Um, so that's sort of underemployed there. Yeah. Very big topic when that Great Recession was happening in 08, 09. So yeah, this gives you a little bit more, adding a little bit more to that context of defining your workforce and, um, what things are missing or not missing and et cetera, et cetera. Uh, any questions about the occupation diversity before we move on? All right. Um, Next up is the industry diversity. Um, so here we get a couple additional things. So I'll first start out by saying uh, the data that powers the industry diversity analytic is a little bit different than the data that the raw data set that powers other analytics within JobsEQ. Most of the other industry and data in JobsEQ is basically comes from the quarterly census of employment and wages, which is published by the BLS. Um, Here we're using something called in industry diversity. Here in industry diversity, we're using something called QWI, quarterly workforce indicators, which is a little bit more from I think the Census Bureau. And um, data set doesn't update as frequently, so here or it's not as current. So here we have 2024 Q2 data. Elsewhere we're looking at 2025 Q2 data. So that's just something to keep in mind. But for that trade-off, we do get a couple cool additional columns. Um, so here we have turnover rates. So this is actually showing you, the amount of people who are turning over. So when you look at like transfers and stuff like that, that's not really true turnover rate. Looking at people who are making large occupational shifts, from one two-digit SOC code to another two-digit SOC code. Here, we're just looking at whether they're leaving the job or not. So, in retail, if I put in retail here, this can capture somebody, working, going from working at Costco to, well, I'm not sure if that's a retailer, Old Navy to the Gap, or something like that. Yeah, that type of stuff. Um, the You also get sort of these additional things like, okay, new stable jobs. So these are people who've I think have worked at least one quarter in the job, what their salary is, but they weren't working at that thing they weren't working at that company in the previous quarter. So there's this stable one here and see sort of new hires. Um, but the cool thing about this is we get sort of to look at a cross tag of demographic categories. Let's switch this back to manufacturing real quick. But here, I can look at gender splits. If we're looking at occupation diversity, and see, more women tend to work in, sorry, more men tend to work in manufacturing than women. Um, and then I could add like an education component here. So I can sort of look at this. So like, okay, men with a high school degree is about 7,483 in manufacturing. Women with a high school degree is 3,682. I can compare, sort of these different stats here and stuff like that. Which, can be sort of interesting. Once again, we don't know exactly what occupations folks are working within this sector, so that hopefully explains some of the wage differences here rather than something more nefarious. But yeah, that's the industry diversity analytic. You can do these sort of different cross tabs here. Any questions about that? Alrighty. Couple more things before I get into some analytics that you don't have on your license. Um, you'll go over the occupation wages analytic. Um, um, so, in Data Explorer Occupation Stat data set, you can look at stuff by the mean, median, and all these percentiles still. That's sort of not the value add of looking at the data here within this occupation wages analytic. Um, the cool thing that you can do here is access this labor availability query type. And here you can look at how many people make above or below a certain wage threshold. So I'll do something like uh, I'll do $15. No, no. So here I can see how many people make above or below $15 an hour. So most chefs and head cooks in our region earn above $15 an hour. Well, it's about sort of a close to a 50-50 split for fast food cooks here. Um, so, this can be an interesting tool for your living wage or prevailing wage studies. Or, if you're working with an employer directly and they say, hey, we're planning on coming in and offering this wage, you tell them, oh, people are used to not earning that much here, so you should have a lot of people willing to work for you. Or maybe it's the opposite, where it's like, hey, want to increase that wage to attract more workers. So this can be sort of an interesting tool. Any questions about that? Alrighty. Um, do you want me to go over the economic impact analytic?
Yeah, maybe quickly just so that I can refresh.
Mhm. Um, so you want to put in the industry of the incoming firm. Um, sorry, the industry that the incoming firm operates in. Um, yeah, sure. We do landscaping services, why not? So they're gonna hire 100 people. So the event size can be the amount of people that are going to work there, or it can be what their annual revenue is projected to be. Um, and then you sort of have three different types of economic impact, right? You have your direct, your indirect, and your induced. Direct is the economic impact that's going to occur directly from the firm operating, right? So they're going to hire 100 people. Based on that, predicting your annual revenue is going to be about 10.9 million. Compensation is going to be about 5.5 million. This does include health benefits and things like that. So direct is, the direct economic impact from that firm operating in the region. Indirect is the economic impact that's going to occur is the additional business to business transactions that occur now that the firm is operating in the region. Um, So this landscaping services is going to um, have an office, right? Need offices have bathrooms, and bathrooms need toilet paper. So if that firm buys toilet paper from a local vendor in the region, that's an additional economic transaction that is going to occur because that firm is now operating in the region. So that's what the indirect is, those additional business to business transactions. Induced is those additional people to business transactions are going to occur because the firm's operating in the region. So, now I have a job at the landscaping firm. I have more money in my pocket and go watch a movie or buy a meal at a local diner or something like that. So that's what these additional induces where these additional people to business transactions are occurring. That makes sense? Awesome. If you scroll down, the second table shows you the multipliers that are used to calculate these numbers above. So, 100 times 0.11 gives you 11 there. So that's what's going on there. Quick aside about these multipliers, if you open up the help page for this analytic, the there's a blog post here. It goes into in depth about how these multipliers are calculated. Generally speaking, we take a little bit more of a conservative approach compared to popular industry models out there. Um, when you're getting into measuring economic impact, things can get a little, people can start throwing out wacky numbers. When it comes time to remodel the new, sports stadium, people, it does the, this whole, it's, it's supporting the whole region. Sort of going back to the LeBron example before, right? So, um, I like that we sort of take a more conservative approach, where there's sort of been thrown out some crazy numbers out there. Um, so that goes into those multipliers a bit. If you scroll down, this shows you where what industries those indirect induced effects are expected to occur at. So sort of see where those ripple effects are going to expected to occur. That's that bottom table. A couple other things. If you quick specify a different event region, here you can see what the impact is going to be for entire region. So let's say the lawns landscaping firm is going to be located in Palm Beach, but I want to make the argument that this is going to impact not just Palm Beach County, but the entire state of Florida. So the State Economic Development Board should chip in some incentives to, help attract this business here or help support the business. So I can make the impact region be Florida, but the event region where the firm is going to be located, that's where that. And the event region has to be located within the impact region. That's the only condition there. But here, you can see some some of that stuff here. Um, any questions about that?
Nope.
All right. Also too, this is mentioned in the help page. Um, but if you have something where you want to measure like, oh, you're going to need to build a whole building or something like that, and you want that to be included in part of the economic impact, you would have to run a couple of different sort of economic impact scenarios. One, sort of the capital investment. So, you know, non-residential building construction could be the industry and how much it takes to build that building. And then you're going to want to run a separate impact for the actual business once it's up and operating. And these impacts are annual. I will point out too, you know, this isn't sort of the same results or stuff you get if you paid for a full economic impact study. Just sort of gives you an idea of what the potential ripple effects could be. Um, if you want to do a full economic impact study, we do have a consulting team here at Shimura that specializes in doing those sort of more in-depth studies. All right. Um, was there one thing that I wanted to show? Let's see here. All right, let's get into some of the things that you don't have. Well, one last thing that you do have before we get into things you don't have. Um, job and talent locator could be interesting. What we do here is you put in an occupation you might be interested in, and then sort of shows you sort of that information for all the MSAs in the USA here. So here you can see, okay, there's 225,966 registered nurses working in the New York metro area. Per average annual wage is this, blah, blah, blah. Um, so, you know, this is sort of a quick way to compare multiple MSAs at once. Speaking of that point of comparing multiple MSAs at once, right? Because that was one of the things you were interested in. As mentioned, you can do that in Data Explorer. In demographic profile, you may say, oh, looks like I can only compare three regions at once. Well, there's a workaround for that. Um, and that is to use the maps analytic. So if you click, let me just switch this to Miami here. Um, if you click a variable here, it'll automatically put it on the map. And then, you can come over here, adjust this query. So we'll put in USA and then MSA. And then we'll show you that for every MSA. And you may say, hey, Jonathan, I don't want it as a map. I just want it as a spreadsheet. And then once again, you can export this as a spreadsheet. So that's one way you can do that. Um, I'm sure you've discovered like you can do this for every MSA in Data Explorer. Although it's sort of a long query sometimes, and that if it's occupation related data, I would actually recommend using data fetch. Um, because data fetch was created to sort of grab um large amounts of data once very quickly. Um, so and what you do, create a query like this, a USA, change the detail label to MSA, and now it's going to grab data for all the MSAs in the USA. And then, do registered nurses here. Um, here you put the things that you want in your query. Uh, do the employment with place of residence here if you want. We have cost of living adjusted wages here, so that's kind of interesting. Um, and then you have all those like demographic categories you were looking at in, um, you know, Ocdem graphics, sort of these other things here. And then you click run, and voila, that's for every MSA in the USA here. So pretty quick and easy. Any questions about that?
Nope.
All right. Uh, so then let's talk about some of the stuff you don't have. Um, let's so are you familiar that we have job ads data within JobsEQ?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that was discussed with us.
Mm-hmm. So the cool thing about job ad information within so we job ad information JobsEQ is we update that daily. And so you can use job posting trends. It's kind of like a free focus group. It really allows you to sort of peer into the minds of employers and see what skills they're asking your workforce to have. We download job ads from over 49,000 different data sources, from job boards like Indeed and LinkedIn to staffing companies to direct company websites. We'll go to a company's direct website and grab job posts from there. And once we have this large set of job posts, we then deduplicate them amongst each other and run them through a model that's able to read the text of the job posting and assign it to a specific SOC code or occupation. So here, you can view, um, you can view job ads by occupation and SOC code. Our model is able to do other things like pick out the minimum education level being requested by the employer in the job posting, identify any sort of certifications and hard skills and stuff like that. So what you have access to in occupation snapshot here is a sampling of job postings that were active at some point in the last 30 days. So, you can click this little hyperlink here and it'll show you the job title of the job posting, the employer who posted the job posting. This is a raw location text from the job posting itself. The start date tells you not when the job post tells you when the job was posted online. The end date tells you, oh yeah, sorry, the start date tells you when the job post is posted online, not when the new person will start working at the job. The end date will tell you whether the job post is still online and active, so whether you can still apply to the job or not. And then if you're able to identify any wage information in the job posting listed here, but not every job posting contains that wage information. Um, and you can ignore this job ID thing. It's internal. Um, if you click the job title underneath job posting, you can see the text that we used to classify this job posting as a retail salesperson. So it's a non-remote full-time job ad. And here are the things that the employer is asking applicants to have, the skills that they're asking applicants to have and to work there. Um, so that's there. Um, if the job post is still online and active, this view original button still is available. If you click that open, you can see where we source the job posting from. So this is directly from the Macy's website here. Um, that's the original job posting. The cool thing about this URL is you can send this to someone and they don't need to have a JobsEQ login to view this page. So you can send this to someone, they can click view original and then apply to the job posting directly here, which is kind of cool. And like I said, the cool thing about these job ads is they really allow you to peer into the minds of employers in the region. It could be that the formal definition for a retail salesperson, that SOC code, doesn't really mention that people need to know how to drive a forklift. But maybe you're looking for these job ads and over again, employers are asking applicants to have that skill set. That could be a sign for you all to get together with your education partners and expand forklift certification programs in the region. So pretty cool. Now to really do a skill analysis, we kind of require you to sort of go through each of these job postings, right, and sort of track stuff down. So this is like what you have available currently underneath your license. We do have a full job posting database analytic called RTI. And here you can categorize the job posting in a variety of different ways and you have a lot more flexibility around how you query for them. RTI is not currently included included underneath your license. Um, but I'll go over this real quickly. So here, you can query across multiple years if you want. Uh, you can do the last 3 months instead of the last 30 days. Um, you have different job ad statuses. So active during means it can be active at any point during our time frame, and it'll be included in our query. So job posting at the present moment could be dead, it can no longer apply to it. As long as it's active at some point in the last 3 months, it's going to be included in our query here. The job post could have been posted a year ago. As long as it's active at some point in the last 3 months here, it's going to be included in our query. If you only want to look at job posts that were posted in the last 3 months, you'd switch that to newly posted during and can view the data that way. Here, in this chart, you can see the year-over-year job posting trends. Because this is updated daily, it sort of, gives you some real-time analysis. RTI stands for real-time information. Um, and then here, we're able to take these 43,400 job ads, and we're able to classify them to 739 different SOC codes. And here we can use those full 8-digit ONET SOC codes here, which is kind of cool. Um, categorize them by the raw location text in the job posting itself. Um, by the company who posted the job posting. So if you click that here, you can see all the job postings we have at the University of Miami here. You categorize them by job title, posting the job posting. Hard skill, mention the job posting. Soft skills, industry of the company that posted the job posting. Um, minimum years of experience required by the job posting. Minimum education level being requested by the job posting. Programs or majors mentioned in the job posting. Certifications mentioned in the job posting. And then you have job type. So remote, temporary, specified, all these sort of things here. You're able to filter these job ads by any of the categories we just viewed. So, for example, sometimes they're in the sort of nerdy circles that I run in. There's a debate about what programming language people should learn, Java or Python or something like that. What you could do is like, let's say, oh, I'm curious about the last 12 months here, and I want to see uh, how many job ads mention Java, how many job ads mention Python. Spell it right. And you can come down to the hard skills section here and say, okay, there's 3,248 job ads that mention Python compared to 1,076 that mention Java. Maybe we should encourage people in our schools to learn Python instead of Java. Then you can also, for the job ads that contain wage information, you could also add that as an additional column here. And oh, but the job ads that mention Java tend to pay more on average compared to Python. So, that could also be sort of an interesting factor to include there as well. Um, ads closed here is another additional column that could be kind of used as a proxy. So, how many people are being hired. Um, and then duration days could also be used as a proxy to sort of tell you how long a job opening is open. If it's open for a long time, that might indicate that position's hard to fill. Although, that can get skewed because people, do close job ads for other reasons than the position being hired. The keyword filter allows you to search the raw text of the job posting. Um, so, you can look for specific keywords if you want. And, you can export these things as a time series if you want to do an analysis that way or something like that. Any questions about that? And you can create these things called RTI alerts. Um, so if there's You can create a job posting. Sorry, you can create an RTI query, then have yourself be sent a list of new job postings that match that query. So this is useful for, if you want to keep track of a specific occupation, how the number of job ads change over time, or help somebody out with their job search or whatever. All right. The other thing I'd point out that might be of interest is we have sort of a complementary database called Resume Forensics. Um, so instead of looking at job postings, we're scraping resumes now. And this could be sort of an interesting, um, you can perform a variety of different analysis, but one of them that's sort of interesting is maybe sort of a brain drain analysis. So you can see, okay, these folks went to school in, you know, Miami. Um, but where are they living now? Maybe I want to change this to state. So, you know, majority of our residents stay in Florida, but we have some moving to New York and all these other things. Let me see if I can remember this thing. Put in here minus header dot location. Eh, 1 second here. I'm gonna have to. I forgot the advanced keyword technique that I used. Uh, but basically, what I'm going to do is um, exclude um, people who live in Florida still from this analysis. And that way I can, oh, there we go, minus header dot location. States 12. 12 is the FIPS code for Florida there. All right, notice I removed there. So now I can see, okay, these people went to school in Miami, MSA here, but you can see, what they're doing afterwards. So you can see their employer. This is the most recent employer on the resume. Um, their occupation here, that sort of stuff. And you can see other schools mentioned on the resume here. And if you click, let's say software developer here, you can actually see the LinkedIn profiles that we scraped. So if you click this here, this person now lives in New York. Here's their LinkedIn profile. Went to the U here, as you can see, and now they work at Capital One. So, um, yeah, sort of interesting for a brain drain analysis, for that sort of thing. Where are folks going after they graduated? Where most of them staying here? That sort of stuff. That's the resume forensics analytic. Um, the other thing that I point out really quickly is the skill gaps analytic. So you do have access to this one. Um, and what we do is we take a sampling of our resume data and take a sampling of our job posting data, and we look at the skills mentioned in each and just cross-reference the two to create these skill gaps analysis. Um, so that's sort of how these gap analyses are created. So candidates, represent the number of resumes that mention the specific skill, and job openings represent that. And so that's sort of how those gaps are created there. Um, so that's skill query type in a specific occupation. Yeah. I'll do computer occupation. You can type in a specific skill. So, we can type in our Python skill here and look at that, see those gaps. Um, and then region. Here you can add multiple regions. So just a total occupation here, but Chicago. New York. Do sort of those skill gaps analysis, stuff like that there. And I think you can do up to like 75 MSAs here or whatever, so you can to your heart content. Any questions about that? And then the final add-on analytic that might be of interest is the employer. Well, sorry, I guess there's two more, but anyway, employer database. Um, this we don't have a lot of company identifying information in JobsEQ because a lot of our raw data sources are government data sources, and they try and prevent you from identifying folks. But here is one of the data sets or tools that allow you to identify specific company things, company names. And the data from employer database comes from comes from a vendor called Database USA. This is where I have to read a bunch of disclaimers. Uh, so Database USA claims that their data is 95% accurate. Shimura cannot speak to these claims. They claim to triple verify it, blah, blah, blah. We also can't speak to these claims. Um, you know, what they're trying to do is basically perform a census of all the businesses in the USA on a monthly basis. Kind of a difficult task. That being said, it's not unusual for folks to come in here and say, oh, that business is no longer located in my region, or oh, you guys are missing this one. If that happens, let us know via live chat. We'll send that to Database USA and say, hey, you want to maybe check your records and look for this business or not. And you know, we'll try to get them to update their records. But here, you can basically type in an industry and see what businesses are in that industry. And you have access to the preview mode. So this will show you the top 10 employers by two-digit NAICS code.
Yep,
Um,
I do have that.
yeah. But with the full mode, the full employer database, you can export records, and when you export records, it will give you the actual number of people employed in that industry, and will tell you whether the business is woman-owned, whether it's a nonprofit, and sort of other data points like revenue and things like that. So um, that might be of interest. Does come out with a certain amount of credits though, so I think you know uh, you can't necessarily export records willy-nilly. Um, One thing to also be aware of is if you do use our employer database analytic, you do have some like features where you get to like use your custom regions and industry groups and stuff that you created. Um, However, I will say I did find when I was working for the Cuyahoga County Department of Development, our public library system subscribed to something very similar. Um, so, might be worth checking out to see if your public library has access to a similar system and, uh, you know, save some money there. Um, the last thing, which this is really more for site selectors, but might be of interest to you, is labor EQ. This is an add-on analytic. Um, and basically, you can either select an industry that an incoming business you're interested in may operate in, or an occupation that might be of super priority for you. And this basically ranks all the MSAs on these sort of different categories here. So I like to look at this sort of degradation grid wise, but labor availability, where's it? Training. So like sort of training pipeline. So training folks to become that occupation age. Sort of all these sort of different factors here, and you can weight the importance of it, and it will change the rating of these different MSAs here and stuff like that. So that is something, that's another tool that's available here. You can see where your MSA possibly stacks up on these different factors if you want. Sort of, you can kind of recreate a lot of these factors within JobsEQ and other analytics, but you have to like pull from a couple different tools and stuff. This is here for you already set up. And this is kind of geared towards site selectors in general, this tool. Uh, Other than that, I mean, there's a couple of these new tools here that, housing demand might be of interest to you.
Mhm.
Basically it says like, let's say there's a firm, you want to be a little bit more, food manufacturing. Let's say, uh, I'll make something up, tortilla manufacturing. If there's tortilla manufacturing to come in, they're going to hire 300 people. This tells you what the new housing demand would be for that. So, okay, we're gonna have 16 people, migrate into the region because of this new employer, and this is sort of what the new housing demand breakdown would be.
And is this tool, will it be added to our account soon, or is it a separate add-on?
It's a separate add-on.
Okay.
And actually, speaking of that, there's this marketplace tab here in the left
Mhm.
side menu. This tells you sort of all the different add-ons that are available and what's available underneath your license and stuff like that. And we'll list your CRM up top here. Yeah, and your CRM, you can reach out to them and they can demo and explain some of these things here for you. The last couple of things here, you already know about the custom tab. Some new features is we added this save tab. So this will contain, sort of all the saved queries. So if you have something in Data Explorer or Report Builder, you can find that here. This cool new feature that I like is recent. So here you can see all the recent queries that you've sort of run. So, some of the stuff in JobsEQ you can't save, a query, for example. And let's say you were building out a really detailed skills gap query where you add a bunch of MSAs and you're like, I don't want to rerun that again. You can come here to open. See it. Hopefully I'm not overselling it too much. Uh, didn't save the one I wanted here. I was hoping maybe theoretically can. I don't know. This query type stuff can be a little thing. But in theory, you can come in here to recent and we'll populate stuff. Let me see if I can find one real quick. I'm find it here, like Data Explorer one. Even though you can save a query in Data Explorer, this will this pops up a query that I like ran previously. So, that can be kind of cool. And then Discover here. Um, this is kind of like a quick start page for JobsEQ. So up top, you can see sort of things you can do by sector here. This gives you some like suggestions of useful tools to answer sort of common research questions. Um, and then the connect to Shimura section. So here you can see sort of how people are using our data in the real world, so real world cases. So it can be either view webinars that we host every few weeks or so, or sort of blog posts. Um, so that's available here. Uh, any final questions?
I don't think so. No, this was very helpful.
Awesome.